12:33 and 18 seconds on the 28th of April, 2025. 451.4 kilovolts on a network built for 400, 1.128 per unit. The admissible range for the Spanish 400 kilovolt network is 375 to 435 kilovolts, and that reading sits 16 kilovolts above the top of it. A second earlier, the same network was at 442.5 kilovolts, 1.106 per unit, already outside. The voltage was not falling. It climbed through the last seconds the Iberian Peninsula had power. Before any of that, a slow drift. Between 12:32 and 12:32 and 57 seconds, net load on the peninsula rose by 317.3 megawatts, and wind and solar generation by a further 208. Then the first protection device in the sequence operated at 12:32 and 57.220 seconds. A 400 to 220 kilovolt transformer at Granada. Its overvoltage relay saw 242.9 kilovolts on phase B against a setting of 110% of nominal, with no time delay at all. 355 megawatts came off the system. Just under 30 seconds after that relay operated, the peninsula was dark. Something raised that voltage in the minutes before it. The panel that investigated the event calls the actions taken that morning correct and effective. Hold on to that. It is the hardest thing in this film. Page 51 of the expert panel's final report carries a table numbered 2-4. It is the only place in 472 pages where the inertia of the Iberian Peninsula is given a number. Inertia here is a measure of stored rotational energy. The table gives it two ways. As energy, 119,474 megawatt seconds for the Iberian Peninsula on the day of the incident. As a time constant, it is not a value at all. It is a range, 2.21 to 2.71 seconds. The report says why, in its own words. Inertia calculation is affected by significant uncertainty. That is the figure for the 28th of April. There is no figure for the 27th or the 26th or for any other day in the document. Section 2.4 still carries the sentence the interim report left in it. The calculation of inertia for days preceding the incident will be implemented in the final report. This is the final report. It was not. So the number has nothing to sit beside. Nothing in 472 pages says whether 2.21 to 2.71 seconds is low for that system, or ordinary or high. The claim that the 28th of April was an unusually low inertia day has no comparison anywhere in the document. Neither does the claim that it was an ordinary one. The comparison was promised. It is not there. On page 302 of the final report, the panel reran the whole event with more inertia in the system. That is the test. With more stored energy at lunchtime, does the peninsula still lose synchronism with the rest of Europe? The answer is in the executive summary, on page 21. Even with significantly higher inertia values, the loss of system synchronism would not have been avoided, considering the sequence of events. The reason the panel gives is the cascade itself. As generator after generator tripped, synchronizing torque fell away rapidly, and the system reached what the report calls the point of no return. Now the caveat, and it belongs here rather than on an end card. Significantly higher means exactly 20%. A fifth more inertia, inside the sequence of events that actually happened. It is not a test of a differently built system. In the simulation, the extra inertia made the outcome very slightly worse. The peninsula injects and absorbs energy with the rest of Europe in a slower and slightly stronger way. The overvoltage disconnections happen before than in the base case, and the frequency evolves in a steeper way towards blackout. And in section 4.4.2.5, even under the assumption of perfect execution of defense plan actions, neither these measures nor additional inertia would have been sufficient to prevent system collapse. Then the question of where the word ended up. Inertia does not appear in the report's root cause tree. It does not appear in the conclusions of Chapter 9. There is no recommendation on inertia levels anywhere in the document. The panel tested inertia and left it out of its answer. 3 minutes past 12, on the 28th of April, the Iberian system began oscillating at 0.63 Hz. It ran for 5 minutes, until 8 minutes past 12, at an amplitude of 100 MHz peak to peak. A continuous survey of that system's oscillation modes had been running since January of 2025, recording the frequencies at which the peninsula swings on its own. By April, it had 2 of them on file. The East-Center-West Inter-Area mode at about 0.2 Hz, and a Morocco to Iberia mode near 0.5. Of 0.63 Hz, the report says 4 words, not naturally present. It had been seen once before. The 8th of April, 6 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, 15 MHz peak to peak, after a generation ramp of 2.6 gigawatts. 15 MHz 20 days earlier, 100 on the 28th. So this was not the system ringing at one of its own notes. Something was driving it, at a frequency the peninsula has no resonance at. The panel went looking for the source, and used 6 independent methods to do it. They converge on one inverter-based plant in the province of Badajoz. The plant is not named. Generating units are anonymized in this report, so it is called Plant A. And the panel writes down the limit of its own finding in the same section. With the available data, no method can provide by itself definitive proof of the source. 6 methods, 1 plant, and no proof. 16 minutes past 12. The plant increased its power set point, and its oscillatory behavior became less pronounced. That is the report's sentence, and it runs the opposite way to the shape of the story. The machine got steadier by being turned up. The mechanism the panel gives is age and operating point. Old inverters can experience instability issues, especially when running at intermediate power levels. During the period from 3 minutes past 12 to 12:15 and 12 seconds, it writes, the inverter was not operating at maximum power, not at the top of its range, in the middle of it. Where the middle begins and ends, the report does not say, and nothing here will put edges on it. The plant's own rating is not published either. Its output that morning is described in words, not operating at maximum power, and never once in megawatts. The plant was a pre-RFG installation, an existing generator, in the report's phrase, predating the European requirements that apply to new ones. There was a second inverter-based plant on the same node. Same conditions, commissioned in 2021 and compliant with those requirements. It exhibited a lower response to the oscillation. 2 plants, 1 node, 1 difference the report actually names, not what they generate when they were built. And the older plant did not know. No alarms or anomalies related to the oscillatory behavior were found in the plant controller event list. 12 minutes of it, nothing in its own log. 12:19. The southwest corner of continental Europe began swinging at 1/5 of a hertz. It ran for 3 minutes, until 12:22, and it reached about 200 millihertz. Twice the amplitude of the episode 16 minutes earlier, and a completely different object. The panel names this one, the East-Center-West Inter-Area mode, at 0.2 Hz, one of the 2 frequencies the modal survey had already found. The report describes it as a classic electromechanical inter-area mode. It is not a converter phenomenon, and no part of the document attributes it to renewable generation. What that name gives is 3 regions and an order. It does not give a shape. Which region leads, which one lags, how far each of them swings. None of that is in the material behind this film, and none of it will be drawn here. What was measured is the envelope, how wide the swing got and when. From 1219 it widened, then it went on widening. An oscillation that a system is holding down loses a little of itself on every cycle and shrinks. That is what damping is, and it is measured as a percentage. This one had damping on the wrong side of zero. Negative damping does not settle and does not shrink. Every cycle comes back larger than the one before it. The mitigation measures that morning eventually stopped the growth. They did not reverse it. For 3 minutes, it did not settle. 3 minutes and 51 seconds past 12. The oscillation damper on the direct current link to France switched itself off. It is called PODQ. It blocked automatically about 50 seconds after the first oscillation began, on the manufacturer's own anti-saturation logic, and stayed blocked until the blackout. The numbers it was blocked for. The inter-area mode measured before mitigation, minus 1.03%. After mitigation, plus 0.28. Had PODQ been available, the panel calculates the second episode would have been damped at 2.28% instead of 0.28. Its comment: it would have been desirable to have the PODQ controller enabled during the second inter-area oscillation. Then the machines. A power system stabilizer is a control loop on a generator that damps this kind of swing. Table 2-5 lists which Spanish technologies have them. Nuclear no, hydro no, coal no. Pumped storage, 1 plant 5 units. Combined cycle, 6 plants 8 units. 13 units in the whole of Spain. The report contradicts itself here. A footnote on page 220 says stabilizers are declared and adjusted in most combined cycle units, in one nuclear power unit, and in a hydro power plant in Galicia. Table 2-5 says nuclear has none, and so does section 4.2.5.3.2. The report does not acknowledge it, and the remedy it rates highest is not a spinning machine. 2 grid-following voltage source converters with damping controllers give 1.84 percentage points. 8 synchronous condensers give 0.69. 4 static compensators give 0.53. The best damping on offer is converter-based. 25 minutes past 12. The dispatchers began closing 400 kilovolt lines and cutting the exchange on the border with France. They were damping the oscillations, which is what the procedure tells them to do. The root cause tree gives the priority in its own words. Oscillations are a major threat to system security. Initiating mitigation measures in order to damp oscillations has highest priority from operational perspective. The panel's assessment of the maneuver itself is 2 words, correct and effective. And then the same item finishes its sentence. On the day of the incident, the dispatchers implemented mitigation measures during both oscillatory episodes, which successfully damped the oscillations but contributed to increase the voltage. There is a box in that tree that reads, damping oscillations by activation of mitigation measure procedure, reduction of exchanges on the Spanish to French border, reconnection of transmission lines. It feeds directly into a box that reads, fast voltage increase. Analysis 5 reruns the period from 1225 to 1233 and 16 seconds, without the 10 400 kilovolt lines that were closed for damping. Its finding, in its own words, the closing of the 400 kilovolt lines reduces the network impedance and redistributes the active and reactive power flows of lines, which in turn increase the voltage profile in the area. The same page again on reclosing transmission lines. A correct and effective maneuver to reduce oscillations, which had the side effect to generate additional reactive power, worsening the voltage profiles. 1 action, 2 consequences, and the report does not separate them into a good half and a bad half. The panel does not blame the operators, and this is why. Nothing here was a mistake. The 22nd of April, 2 minutes and 27 seconds past 7 in the evening. 452 kilovolts on the same network. 17 kilovolts above the top of the admissible range. 0.6 of a kilovolt higher than the reading 6 days later at 12:33 and 18 seconds. It was corrected by connecting 22 shunt reactors, one after another, and the voltage came back down inside the range. There had been no oscillation beforehand. That is the difference between the two evenings, and it is why the 22nd is not the 28th in rehearsal. Reactors are switched in when voltage runs high and out when it runs low. That is how they were used on both evenings. Through the oscillation episodes on the 28th, voltage had been going low and reactors had been switched out. By the time the system went dark, southern Spain had 1,300 megavolt amperes reactive of reactor capacity connected out of 4,000, 32.5%. In the rest of Spain, 68.9% of what total, the report does not say. It gives that share and no megavolt amperes to go with it. 2/3 of the absorption in the south of the country was installed and was not in service. That is the one hollow thing in this film that is hollow because of a switch position, rather than because nobody wrote the number down. 6 days earlier, 22 had been enough. Between 12:32 and 57 seconds and 12:33 and 19 seconds, 22 seconds, 19 protection devices operated. The panel asked for the settings behind them. Settings for the overvoltage function were received for 8 protection devices out of the 19 trips analyzed. And then the sentence that follows it. All of the settings received diverge from the applicable requirements. All of them, not most of them. Then the classification. Of the 19 trips detected between 12:32:57 and 12:33:19, 9 of them diverged from the applicable requirements and caused the loss of 1,866.7 megawatts. For 3 of the trips, 125.6 megawatts, there is insufficient information. Only 4 of the trips, 195.87 megawatts, seem aligned with the applicable requirements. 4 devices that appear to have done what was asked of them, and between them they took off about 1/9 of what the 9 took. 1 device in the 19 is described completely, and it is the first one. The transformer at Granada, 242.9 kilovolts on phase B, a setting of 110% of nominal, no time delay, 355 megawatts. Now count the groups, 9 and 3 and 4. That is 16. There were 19 trips. The report's own arithmetic reaches 16 of them and stops. 3 of the 19 belong to no group at all. A relay picks up 1/10 above nominal, and it does not let go until the voltage has fallen 5% below the level that picked it up. That gap is hysteresis, and it is the reason setting a relay higher does not fix this. The report puts it on pages 156 and 157. Even though the thresholds are set above the required values, the hysteresis associated with the deactivation of the overvoltage function, 0.95 times the voltage threshold, prevents the requirements from being fulfilled. A device set generously still fails the requirement, not because of where it trips, but because of where it lets go. The second cause is arithmetic, and it is smaller than that. A protection relay never sees the 400 kilovolt line directly. It sees a scaled-down copy of it through a voltage transformer, and somebody has to tell the relay what full scale is. At least 2 plants had been told 396 kilovolts instead of 400. 1%. The setting that looked like 1.10 per unit was, on the real line, 1.09. The 2 plants are given by location and rating because generating units in this report are anonymized. A plant near Seville, 550 megawatts. A plant near Malaga, 154. The report says at least 2 and it names no others. Neither does this film. The nameplate said 396. 12:33 and 19.62 seconds. The Iberian Peninsula stops turning at the same speed as the rest of Europe. The report calls the limit the stability angle and puts it at 90 degrees. It was exceeded. Beyond this angle difference, it writes, any further increase results in a decrease in imported power rather than an increase. When the angle difference reaches 270 degrees, the report continues, power exports from Spain to France begin to decrease. This process continues to repeat with increasing speed due to the growing frequency difference between systems until the systems are fully separated, faster each time round. The alternating current tie to Morocco opens at 12:33 and 20.473 on an under-frequency threshold of 49.5 Hz. At 12:33 and 20.560, the rate of change of frequency reaches -1 Hz per second. Alternating current separation from France at 12:33 and 21.535. The Arja to Hernani 400 kV line on a loss of synchronism relay. At 12:33 and 23.360, it reaches -2 Hz per second. The design withstand written into the Spanish and Portuguese requirements. The measurement lands exactly on the number the regulation was written around. The direct current link to France blocks at 12:33 and 23.960, and the separation is complete. The panel's judgment on the French protection is 1 clause long. The trips enabled the isolation of the disturbance, preventing it from affecting the French system. 4 seconds, the peninsula was on its own. Between 12:33 and 20.6 seconds and 12:33 and 22, 6 steps of automatic load shedding opened in Spain. This is the last line of the defense plan. Relays watch frequency, and at set levels they disconnect blocks of demand to hold what is left. The 6 steps ran from 49.0 Hz down to 48.0. Spain shed 8,505 megawatts, 28.7% of its load. The plan asks for more than that, and the report gives the target twice. The text says a minimum of 38%. Tables 3-8 and 3-10 say 45. This film will not choose between them because the report does not. Against either figure, 28.7 falls short. Portugal shed 2,173 megawatts, 37.1% against 38, short as well and only just. Then a detail on page 200. 2 distribution operators reported that a few under-frequency relays had not yet been adapted to the agreed low-frequency demand disconnection scheme. As a result, 71.03 megawatts were disconnected at 48.7 Hz. How many relays that is, the report does not say. 2 is the number of distribution operators who reported it, not the number of relays. And in Portugal, some plants carry internal protection set at 49 and 51 Hz, set by the manufacturer at commissioning, unchanged since. The distribution operator did not know they were there. Page 116 of the final report carries one line about the table that follows it. Causes are not included in the table as they are unknown in most cases. The table is about 60 rows of generation lost after 12:33 and 19 seconds. No cause is attributed to any of them. The nuclear fleet is in there. 1,045 megawatts, then 653, then 1,692, 3,390 megawatts, and no reason recorded. The largest single trip in the run-up is the same. The Badajoz evacuation line, 582 megawatts, for unknown reasons. Every time in this film carries an uncertainty. The panel puts synchrophasor timing accuracy at plus or minus 30 milliseconds and says not all data is time synchronized with sufficient accuracy. The moments are known to a 30th of a second. The causes are not known at all. Chapter 3 of that report never states a numerical frequency nadir. The trace runs from 50 Hz down through 48.5, then below 44 and stops. This film rests on one document, the expert panel's final report of the 20th of March, 2026. The Spanish operator's account and the government committees were not read for it. And in that one document, for 10 separate events, a sentence recurs. No oscillographic records from the protection system that operated, nor the settings of that relay, were delivered to the expert panel. Those records are owed under Operating Procedure 9, Annex 5, under the European requirements for generators, and under a Spanish ministerial order of 2020. They were owed, they were not delivered.